Yeah, one thing that I'm just sort of reflecting on is what you are advocating to a lot of people who haven't thought about this is correctly going to be understood as limitations on the freedom of, for instance, corporations to make cities bid, and limitations on current freedoms that exist in the capitalist society. I think what you're saying, though, is that the history of moral evolution and of government is actually the imposition of limitations on freedom such that more people experience more freedom to not starve to death and to
exactly. Yeah,
have access
this is
to
positive
healthcare.
versus negative freedom. When the government makes it illegal to murder others, and that is by the way not something that has always been the case in human civilization.
Sure.
We are technically having a freedom removed from us. I can no longer murder somebody without agents of the state coming in to seize me. But we are increasing the total freedom of the society because now people need not fear murder, at least not as much. You get this with most laws. There are plenty of laws that enhance human freedom. And it's funny that you say this, by the way. Have you ever heard the term dictatorship of the proletariat?
Yeah.
Terrible name, terrible optics, great idea. It advocates for essentially what you said earlier. A dictatorship of the proletariats, it doesn't mean authoritarianism. It just means that the only people who get to participate in the governmental processes of a society are the people who are materially affected by those policies. So if you are ultra wealthy or a business owner or some kind of plutocrat or an otherwise removed from the struggle of the common man, you don't get to vote, you don't get to run for office. It's essentially a system where, and you can hang up your coat if you want to. If you want to stop being a business owner, you can. It's that simple. But it's a system where only the people affected by the government actually get to have a say in it. Because let's be real, billionaires aren't affected by the daily passage of laws in the same way that poor people are. They aren't affected by police or by, it's like that old saying.
Well, you're going to have
sorry.
You're going to have a tough time passing taxes on the rich.
Yeah,
because California's talking about a tax rate that only affects people who make $1 million or more. But by this rule, only people who make $1 million or more would get to vote on if it became a law or not. You know what I'm saying? Because they're the only people affected by it.
I mean, if you want to get a long edge case, back in those days, it was more meant as like an exercise in the idea that restricting the freedom of some can actually be beneficial to society's total freedom. We no longer allow, for example, people to freely occupy castles and become warlords of surrounding provinces. We got rid of feudalism. People can't do that anymore. You're not allowed to. But I can imagine some snivel-nosed advocate of feudalism back in the 16th century saying that where the government is, trying to remove the freedom of the nobility to pursue their God-given goal of subjugating the serfs, People did make that argument back 400 years ago. There were conservatives during the Enlightenment who argued against all of those things: democracy, free education. I'm sorry, I'm totally
no. You're making
It's all very complicated.
No, I think broadly, and there's areas where I don't for those listening. But what I consider to be the most interesting and compelling parts of this is one: we're not at the end of history. It is strange for me that people treat capitalism like the end all be all, and they say, yeah, the best we have yet, which is true and has been true at every moment in history of every government that has ever existed. It has always been the best that we had up until then. What we should hope for is to move beyond it, hopefully bloodlessly, not in a revolutionary fashion, in my opinion. Maybe some people think that the revolution is net positive, I guess, in terms of human suffering. And then
those people just think that they're on the low side of the revolution.
Sure.
I think if Americans thought the revolution was going to be people who make $1 a day coming in from other countries and killing all Americans, then no one would want the revolution.
Sure.
The only people that want it have framed the world such that they are the impoverished without looking to all the people who are far poorer than them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think there's a problem of looking.
We got some third worldists here in this podcast. You just described the whole ideology, basically.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Look at me.
So we've got that thing, which I very much agree with, that that this is the movement of history is generally in this direction, and it's generally a good thing. Justin, by the way, something just popped up on the computer. I don't want it to mess up our stream. Do you see that?
What does it say?
All good?
It's not about memory. We lost a podcast once because we ran out of memory halfway through. And
it's the NSA. They heard revolution and they're checking up on the feed.
But yeah, so history is not at its end. One, I feel like so often we can argue about semantics. America is a democracy. America clearly has socialist elements. It clearly has plutocratic elements. It's got all of these different things. And when people argue that it is capitalist or it is socialist, it is so, to me, obviously a medley of all of these things, some of which work in some ways and some of which don't. It seems only obvious that you can experiment in different directions. And that would be my third thing, is I'm open to all of this as an experiment, small scale, see how it goes. If it is true, and I believe you, that your intent is to not screw people or crucify the rich and to generally raise the well-being of people, then these should be experiments that we can agree upon generally if it was a good or a bad outcome. If we start having more worker cooperatives and people live happier, healthy lives, but there's no billionaires, sign me up. I'm on board for that.
I want to see that more than anything else. That's one of the beautiful things about our the fact that we have states, by the way. It's that even if there's a policy that looks like it might be good in a national level, an individual state can implement it, and we can get kind of like a, is this working? Is this not? What are the consequences? We did that with marijuana legalization. We did that with gay marriage. There were a lot of these like big national trends right off the back of individual, usually progressive states that are making these changes as well. And I would love to see something like that. One of the big problems, though, is that we're Americans. We don't actually take good ideas. For example, like the social democracies in Europe. Some of the way their systems work are just objectively superior to ours, as in they produce better outcomes and they cost less money to upkeep, whether we're talking healthcare or transportation. These arguments are like arguments against the implementation of these systems are basically indefensible. We still don't do it, though, because we get into these big culture war arguments, and the Republicans will say like, oh, the socialists, they want big government. They're going to steal away the babies from your wombs and raise them as part of a dystopic Karl Marx strike force to kill you when you're an adult. And the Democrats will usually, well, they're not exactly our allies, are they? The Democrats will usually say, the budgetary concerns have limited our ability to meaningfully advocate for such. I wish we were better at taking good ideas, because you're right. We're not at the end of history. We're not even close to the end of history. We're actually in the midpoint of the biggest technological surge in all of human history. Never before has there even been anything close to the rapid social changes we're experiencing right now. And in spite of that, we hold on to these old world values. It's very regressive of us in a lot of ways. Like the fact, for example, this is just one off the top of my head, the fact that we have like office culture where you go to work and you work 8 hours. Nobody works 8 hours in an office. No human being does this. They work 2 hours and they spend the next 6 hours trying to find ways to convince their boss that they're still working the remaining 6 hours. Nobody gets to be honest about this process. If somebody says, I worked my 2 hours, I'm literally done with work, can I go home? They'll either have more work foisted on them, or the boss will literally ask them to just sit down and pretend for the rest of the 6 hours. It is a puppet show. It is a child's game. But we hold on to this because we don't know of any other ways to get people to do work. Now we have the pandemic. People are working from home. What are the consequences of this? What are the outcomes? We could look into this. There could be studies done, but nobody wants to take that first step because change is scary. And there are a lot of people with a lot of money invested in the way things are expected to work now, Yep.
Yes, I very much agree. I actually even think it's more the first one. I actually think it's more change is scary, because you would figure if you could just outvote, by the number of people that would benefit from saying, hey, fuck it, I work 2 hours. I'm not going to sit here for your 8. I actually think that the bigger thing limiting people is that inability to conceive of a different world, even more than entrenched interest. But that's neither here nor there. I want to move to something that I think
You're not wrong, by the way. Yeah. Like, not at all.
Hope that you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to see more like this and have us do more podcasts, we are 100% funded by our generous patrons. And if you'd like to contribute, there's a link in the description, and we'll have one pop up on the screen right here so that we can do more podcasts where we have fun conversations and hopefully some deep ones like this. Either way, hope that you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.